Right, are you ready for layer number 3? This is the layer of infinite possibility. This really shows you that anything can happen and anything is possible. So although we've got a plan and we've got an outline, it's not set in stone. Things can change and we can add some interesting layers. It's like adding meat to a skeleton now, the flesh to the bone. So we are going to bring in the night sky for our owl. And for this, in the description of the materials that we require for this painting, I've listed a Payne's grey. Now, a Payne's grey is a translucent color, and it will help to bring in the darkness of the night sky without completely covering up everything in the background. But if you don't have a Payne's grey, it's not the end of the world. You can use any black that you have that you dilute a little bit. You can even use a little bit of blue in that. So I've added the Payne's grey to my palette, and in my palette I still have a little bit of that indigo blue purple color that I've mixed in the background. So I'm going to be mixing them together, and you will need a flat brush. Now a flat brush literally looks square, and when I turn it you can see how flat it is, and it's got a square, a very clear bright tip. Okay, so it's not rounded or shaped, but any brush will do. This is just the one I'm going to be using, and this one again is a number 12, but like I said before, there is no system, so I'm just putting it against my hand so that you can see exactly what this brush looks like and how big it is in relation to my hand. So we are going to be using our Payne's grey now to continue to refine our night sky that is behind the owl. Remember, we are remembering how we can see in the darkness of our life, so the night sky is really important. But here is a design element that I've done after looking at it, that I can see the moon is a little bit square down here. So I've drawn myself a new chalk line, and that is where I want the moon to finish, to give it a more circular finish. Out here as well, the line goes too far down for me. So I'm going to be using my Payne's grey, and I'm loading my brush so that there is paint in the belly of my brush, and we come to this new line that I've blocked in, and I connect it with my owl, and then working from this line outwards, I'm using my brush flat like this, and I'm scumbling up and down. I'm going to completely color in the outside night sky to my painting, connecting with the line of the owl's wings. I'm scumbling outwards. If the paint feels too dry for you, just dip the tip of your brush in some water, reload your brush with some paint, and come back to this outline of the owl's wings, touching the branch it's sitting on. You can see I'm blocking that in, and then using the remaining paint on the brush, I use it to color in the background, the night sky. Isn't it amazing how much the contrast is now giving you a clear vision of the owl? I continue to do the same technique down here. Where the owl's tail feathers is. Got a lot of chalk there, just want to blow it away. Dip the tip of my brush in the water, bring it to my paint and load my brush again for this section. Just connecting with the black outline that I've placed in previously. Working in the night sky. And you will see the Payne's grey has a translucency to it. I'm not trying to opaquely cover everything in the background. I would like to see some of that texture and movement that we've brought in with our freedom layer still shining through. It just creates a visual interest to the viewer later when the painting is complete, when they are drawn in to see, but what is hiding there in the background? That looks so interesting. So we continue in this fashion all the way around, filling in the night sky, making any changes that we still want to do. I'm going to do the same here to my moon, bringing it in to form a better circle. Improve the fluidity of my paint with some water, loading the belly of my brush. And again, it's not the end of the world. If you make a mistake, don't panic. I think sometimes we make a commitment to something and we begin to take our baby step action steps, and then something goes wrong. Like I've just painted half of my leaf away there. It's not the end of the world, because remember, you can always change it. The underneath layer is dry, so I'm just going to use another clean damp brush, and I'm just going to come and just take that paint away. That's too much. And later when I paint my leaf, I can always make it bigger again. This is the forgiving aspect of acrylic paint. You can layer it and anything can be changed going forward. Beautiful. Such clarity. Isn't it wonderful to experience this beautiful clarity on the canvas? So we continue up here with the same technique, bringing in our night sky, working around our shapes, refining and defining as we go. If your paint gets too dry, just dip it in a little bit of water, not too much. You don't want the whole bucket of water. You don't want your paint to run, and you don't want your paint to be so translucent. Remember, this is not a watercolor class, this is an acrylic class. So you want a good layer of paint to work with. You must be able to smear the paint on your canvas little bit by little bit. I think this moon shape can still be refined a little bit better. There we go. That's awesome. Our night sky is blocked in. Infinite possibilities is open and available to you at all times. So then I'll just go back in and refine any areas that I feel need some clarity and refinement on the outside of our night sky. And you will not believe how far you've come already. Just a few minutes ago, you didn't know that you will be able to do this, and you've already blocked in your owl, the moon, the branch, the leaves, and you filled in the night sky. That is amazing. We are making some beautiful progress. I just noticed this one element I didn't put in yet, and that is just the eyelids of my owl that I want to see there. So now I know where those are going to go as well. Great. Rinse out your brush and allow this layer to dry completely, and when we come back we are going to fill in our moon. Are you ready to paint in your moon? This is really getting very exciting. Okay, so I've decided I want a nice glowing yellow moon, but yellow is very translucent. So I'm just going to show you a little bit here. If I just paint the yellow over my moon, and also if you're using a student grade quality paint, you might find that the yellow doesn't cover. You can barely see the yellow that I've painted there. And this is a professional grade I'm using, so just to show you, yellow in any standard is very translucent, and this is a cadmium yellow I've got over there. So I'm going to be using titanium white. Now titanium white is your absolute color that you're going to be using the most in general with acrylic painting. It is your most opaque pigment, and it will completely cover what is on the underneath. So like we did our night sky, I'm going to be using my titanium white to block in my moon. And I'm using my same square brush that I've loaded with titanium white. And you can see with the flat brush I'm using, I can create quite sharp lines. And I'm just going to refine the outside shape of my moon and scumble inwards. Scumble means to just color in and brush away from that outline. Now this doesn't need to be perfect, it's just a thin layer of white, and my brush is quite dry. I didn't use a lot of water because I want this layer to dry quite fast. And I'm just coming on the outside of my dollop of paint and loading my brush so that the paint that I've dispensed stays preserved. I don't dip right into it. And this way you can paint for longer before your paint dries out. Now when we finish this section, I'm going to show you a little tip that you can use to preserve your paint if your painting session gets interrupted, or you need to go to the bathroom, or you need to go to work and you want to come back to it later. Now, one of the design principles of proportion and balance that I like to teach the participants in my workshops is when you place your symbol on your canvas, it really helps for you to, allow the shape to touch the outside perimeters of your canvas. Otherwise, you sit with so much space around the main subject that you are painting that it can feel out of proportion with the canvas that you are painting. So the bigger your canvas is, the bigger your owl needs to be, really. So if you're going to paint on a bigger canvas than my A3 size that I've got here, just keep that in mind. You need to upscale so that your image really fills your canvas, because that way you will have a very nice proportion and balance in your painting. Now I'm also using my white here now to refine some of this black outlines that I've made, like I did with the moon out here. I'm doing with this L shape as well, because I don't need such an enormously thick black line anymore. And I'm refining his shape on his head here as I just give my moon a nice white background. Now you can see my white is covering the color much better than the yellow, but I'm also not completely covering up everything in the background. Now it can take a bit of practice. If you're a first-time painter, you might find it difficult to reserve some of your background by using what we call a glaze or not so much paint. Or the opposite might also be true. You might be so scared of using paint that you are not covering your canvas. So do try to find that good balance between the two. And the secret is in loading your brush with enough paint, but not too much paint. You can see there's not a dollop of paint sitting on my brush. There's just enough paint on my brush for it to smear onto the canvas. So you can still see some of the underneath colors glimmering through, and that's what we want to see. So again, with the moon behind the owl, can you see how much clarity that is bringing to the whole image? And again, more possibilities is opening up for you in exactly how we are going to finish this owl. Now, another part of the owl that I think needs a bit of white paint is the eyeballs. So I'm going to use my eye shape here as well with titanium white. And again, also define this beak shape that I did quite thickly with my white. I'm going to cover the iris now that I drew in, because I can always put it back in, and just give the eye a good layer of white titanium paint. I'm going to keep the eyelids colorful. So this is quite a diverse brush, this square brush, because it gives me the ability to do a very precise line. And when I use the belly of the brush, it gives me a good load of paint in order to bring enough paint to the canvas so that I don't paint forever and ever. Just going to refine this a little bit more as well. There we go. Okay, so now that we've got a little bit of white in here, I'm just going to give that some time to dry, and then we're going to bring in the beautiful yellow glow of the moon. So I'll see you just now. So just a pro tip that I want to give you for the layers that we are painting: if you are working at home and in your studio, you can use your hairdryer to speed things up. So I don't show you where I stand with my hairdryer because it's like watching paint dry. It's quite boring. But just a tip: if you do use your hairdryer, use a medium to cold setting, because you don't want hot fumes, the hot air to release fumes from your paint that can be not good for your health, because I don't always know exactly which brands of paint you work with. Now, acrylic paint is certified non-toxic because the plastic polymer that carries the paint pigment really encapsulates that pigment, but some of the cadmium used can be toxic, so be careful. This is where heat is involved. Otherwise, with normal usage, if it gets on your skin or whatever, it should be fine. If you are allergic in general, just be mindful not to get it on your skin, and if you do, just simply wash it off with soap and water. Other than that, it should be completely safe. So I have a little fan running in the background that is blowing beautiful cool air on me, and it's helping me to dry my layers a little bit faster. During our painting in the park events, we are outside, there's more sunlight, there's more airflow, so these layers do dry quickly. But if your layers isn't dry and you are adding paint on top of a wet layer, you will find that it smears and intermingles with the bottom layers, and that can be a bit frustrating to first comers and new painters. So this is why I always say allow this to dry completely before you proceed, so that you get the same results as I'm demonstrating in this section. So as we paint the moon, I want us to also look at the moon as a symbol, because the moon as a symbol represents so many things: the divine feminine, the cycles. The moon affects the tides of the ocean. It reminds us that there's an ebb and flow to life, and you know, that you must work with it. Like the farmers used to plant with the moon cycles, and it's actually been proven scientifically that if you do plant with the moon cycles, that you have a better harvest, because it helps the seeds to take and to sprout properly. So now I'm using my cadmium yellow in the same way that I did the white, by starting on my outside layer, or outside line, that's a better word, and then working my way inwards. But now you can see how potent the yellow is and how clearly you can see the yellow, because the white that we added is now providing a background for the yellow to really come to the foreground and to speak up and to say what it needs to say. So our beautiful yellow glowing moon is coming to the party. I apologize for any noise in the background. I'm filming here in my neighborhood, and I think there are new neighbors moving in, so hopefully you don't hear too much of that. So we're just using our yellow paint. And again, you can still see some of our first layers in the background glimmering through. I'm not using half a tub of yellow to cover this up. So I think that is something that newcomers to paint wants to do. They want to completely cover up backgrounds, and they want smooth finishes like a printer will do. And that's something that you will maybe be able to do at a later stage in your painting practice, when you learn some blending techniques that can be a little bit more difficult to master, but not impossible. And like I say, this is just a basic technique that I like to teach to newcomers at this stage, because this is more of a process than it is, you know, the complete product orientation that we have in the West. So I've got a very nice Naples yellow in the middle here. It almost looks like titanium white, but it's got a very, very pale yellow hue to it. You can achieve the same by mixing your titanium white and your cadmium yellow. And I'm just going to go from the inside of the owl and brush this brighter, lighter yellow into the moon. Let's create a bit of texture here and a bit of a glow. So again, with a very dry brush. Remember, the moon has got some texture to it. It's not just a smooth, flat surface. And this is a bit of a fantasy moon, but we do want to relate to it. So I'm just using the lighter color here to give the moon a bit of a glow, but I'm working from the owl outwards. So remember, you can make your moon any color. It can be a pink moon, it can be a blue moon, whatever color you fancy. There we go. So I'll just keep scumbling this in, giving some texture to the moon. Right, I like that. So now already you can see how the owl is standing out so much more because of this beautiful glow. You've got a high contrast between the moon and the night sky. And in our next part of this video, we're going to start coloring in our owl. So we are still dealing with layer number 3, the layer of infinite possibility. And now I would like to focus on our branch and our leaves. So I've decided to play with some brown tones here on my palette, and I'm still using my square brush. So I'm going to be using a darker brown to just clarify this branch, and then work with lighter shades going upwards. Because I would really like to let the colorful owl be the main attraction, the main focus of the painting. So I'm going to make all the natural elements in this painting speak for itself. by muting the colorfulness of our first layer, taking it a little bit more towards the background so that everything does not speak as loudly as the owl. I'm just using my brown, darkest brown here. So this brown, let me just tell you quickly, I can't remember my browns, is my raw umber that I've used. And I'm going to be using a little bit of my burnt sienna, and I'm going to be using my cadmium yellow as well. So I'm switching to a little bit of my raw umber here, and I'm just playfully, texturally bringing in some of my lighter raw umber here, not covering up everything that I've just done. Just reminding myself this is a little bit of a branch, so there would be texture. It's not a smooth surface. I'm going to bring in some cadmium yellow and some of that pale yellow to the very top of this branch, because it is reflecting some moonlight in some areas. Also, again, just playfully, and I'm just going to blend some of the areas in with a few dabs of my raw umber again, and then my darkest brown again, just to help imply some of the texture that this wooden branch would have. I'm not paying a lot of attention to detail right now because this is not our detail layer yet. I'm rinsing out because I want to create a beautiful green for my leaves, and I'm just using my kitchen towel here just to make sure that my brush is clean. And this is one way to see if your brush is clean, is if you drag the water off, then the rag is clean as well. So that way you don't contaminate your other colors. Now for my green leaves, I'm going to use my phthalo green as my darkest color. And again, I am doing exactly the same as I did with the night sky and with the moon. I'm starting on the outline there, and I'm just giving it a soft glaze of color. You can still see some of the underneath textures of the first layer, but that's adding some visual interest to the leaves. Now, I do want to create a bit of a bigger outline for this leaf, because remember I went into it with my night sky. So because this is the third layer of infinite possibility, I can still make some subtle changes here without completely changing my entire painting. And then I'm going to use some of the yellow mixed with the green to create a bit of a highlight. So I'm bringing in some highlights here on my leaf, and just using a little bit of the cad yellow with some of the green, and just suggesting some of the leaf details. I'm going to come in with a lighter shade there to just define that outline a little bit better. And also loosely suggest some leaf textures. I think that deals with our branch and our leaves beautifully, and I think it is time to begin addressing our main subject, which is our owl. And remember, we are still dealing with layer 3, so just zooming in on all the possibilities that we have. I think now would be a time to decide what is the main color of his body that we would like to use. Like I said, I would like this texture to really speak in my owl. I don't want to cover it all up. So I'm going to choose a color that I feel will bring everything together, harmonize it all, so that we can begin to bring the owl into our third layer as well, and then we'll take it from there. So I've decided to use my phthalo blue as the color that I'm going to use to harmonize my owl. So I'm still using my square round brush, and I'm just loading the tip of my brush here with my phthalo blue, like so, because I would like to begin to just bring in some shadow from the outside. So again, in the same manner as we did the night sky as well as the moon, I'm going to gently bring in my phthalo blue and I'm going to just thin the paint quite a lot. Remember, phthalo is quite strong, but it is translucent. And I'm just bringing in a thin layer of this blue paint, blending it as I go. So if I'm scared that the paint is going to dry out on me, then I just add a little bit of water to just thin it out. And in this way, I'm starting to bring in a little bit of shape into my owl, starting on this very outside perimeter of our design and working my way inwards. Before it dries, I like to just soften some of it by adding a dollop of water. Let's take that color in under the eye as well. Gently working it into his feathers on the side. So I'm very lightly working with my color and my brush so that I don't cover everything up. So I'm really just glazing it with my phthalo blue. the wrong color there, so I'm just wetting my brush. I dipped into the brown by accident, so while it's still wet, I'm lifting it up. So I'm glad these little incidents happen, because I want to show you that there's no mistakes. If you make a mistake, there's something that you can do about it. Because the underneath layers are completely dry, the wet paint is easily removed with a wet brush. But if we look at this metaphorically in our life, when we realize we are taking an inappropriate action that is not supporting our overall goal, just stop, become aware, and just realign yourself with your vibration, with your intention of what it is that you really want to create. It is not necessary to continue making the mistake that you're making because you started making a mistake and then to punish yourself for it. Just stop, breathe, realign, refocus, and begin again. So this is how this canvas is helping me realize and practice that. Right, let's focus. I'm using the phthalo blue, not the brown, and I am gently working it into my owl outline. And you see me dipping the tip of my brush into the water and then just managing the amount of water that is on my brush. Sometimes I completely rinse it off so that I have a brush filled with water that I can blend an area with. Especially with phthalo blue, it has a lot of staining ability, but I don't want to cover everything up on my underneath layers. So I just want a glaze. It's also helpful to make brush strokes in the direction of the feathers. So it's upward movements and rounded movements that helps to imply the feathers. Now you can already begin to see how this glaze that I'm putting over the owl is beginning to ground this beautiful bird into the painting. Doing the same here with the feathers at the bottom, his tail feathers. And just using my wet brush to blend those colors in very gently. I quite like the way that this phthalo blue is complementing my overall owl design. I'm just continuing to bring in some definition into this layer of the painting. I think his eyelids we can make darker or use the phthalo blue more purely. To make this part of the bird stand out nicely. So one of the reasons why I'm sticking with a bigger brush like this whole time is it also reminds me that I'm not busy with details yet. I'm busy constructing my bird. So by wanting to switch to a smaller brush, I think we automatically want to begin adding details. And this is not the detail layer yet. Our fourth and final layer is the layer where we bring in the detail of the painting. So now we are just refining some areas and we are blocking it in, and in our next layer we will switch to finer detail brushes and bringing more accurate details. But for now I'm quite happy where we are. I just want to fill in his mouth but leave his tongue like that. We'll decide. Right, so this is the completion of our third layer, the layer of infinite possibilities. And when we come back, we're going to deal with our fourth and final layer, which is all about the details. I'll see you now. Before we do that, I just wanted to mention that you can use a big brush now, just a clean brush, and use clean water and just wipe your entire canvas down just to get the final layer of chalk off of your canvas before you work on your final details. There's a very bright chalk line still here that I need to remove, so that's what I'm going to do now. Just give your canvas a good wipe down with a wet brush, and where you see any remaining chalk lines, just give it a good rub-a-dub-dub to really work out any remaining chalk on your canvas. And then just give it a good wipe with a kitchen towel. Right, now let's get painting.